Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Policy Beats. Today, we are joined here with Mr. Zarar Puro. He's a Pakistani journalist, a columnist, and also a talk show host who has worked extensively in print and electronic media. And we will learn more about him through him, of course. Today's discussion will be a lot about crisis communications, media journalism, and how things are floating in Pakistan and also in our neighbor with their interesting kind of media gimmicks. So, sir, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I always ask this question from people that how did they end up in the field that they are in right now? And everyone has a very interesting answer, or it's just a matter of fact kind of a thing.
Yeah, with me, I think it was largely by accident, really.
Oh,
I mean, that's not something I ever set out to do or really deeply intended to do. Being a bit of a nerd, so I always used to enjoy reading
uh-huh.
as a child a lot, generally very curious about history and current affairs and politics. I mean, that was also like sort of the discussions that would take place in my home, right? So Pakistani politics was very much a part of that, global politics, so on and so forth. So, when I was, say, in my teenage years, so I thought I'd try my hand at writing, anything I could maybe think of writing. So obviously a lot of it was really bad, but then it
Mhm.
always is when you're like, starting out. And then somehow I managed to get a rather large column published in The Nation.
I
Okay,
see.
and this was about, interestingly enough, it was a comparison of modern day Israel, contemporary Israel, with the
Mm-hmm.
Crusader kingdom of like around 1100 AD, round about then. So it sort of took the two things that I enjoyed. It took history and it took current affairs, and it sort of melded
Merged
them
it.
together. So that got published. So I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is amazing. But then I also realized that you really can't make a living doing this, because especially in those days, they didn't really pay you a lot. So then after like college, I went over to the news yahan in Karachi, and Imran Aslam Saab was the editor, and he was kind enough to like hear me out. I mean, who does that? He was walking literally. I mean, through someone like some, mutual people or whatever. I was like, yeah, I would like to meet you. And he was really, really kind, and he was really, really helpful. And honestly, I mean, one of the great mentors, I think, not only of my life, but I think of an entire generation of Pakistani journalists. I mean, the man was a legend. I can't say enough good things about Imran Saab, right? Oh, he hated being called Imran Saab. So I can call him Imran Saab now, right, to you. So then I started working in the news as a sub-editor. So I always have a great love for sub-editors. I think the sub-editors are the unsung heroes of a newsroom, and they should remain unsung, I also feel. But so it started there, but again, the money thing was a real problem. So then
Mm.
after like a couple of years, then I went and I did some other stuff. Some of it worked, most of it didn't. And then when Geo English was being launched, this is
Mm.
I think Musharraf ke time pe or something along that time. Yeah, it was during Musharraf's time. And so some of the people I'd worked with in the news, so they were like, yaar, is bande ko call karo. So they called me and I went over there and then I joined them. And then, one thing led to another. Wahan se, to Dawn, then Dawn to Express, then, back again with Geo and then back to Dawn. And so this sort of kept happening. And
The
that's where
cycle
we
just
are.
started.
Yeah, and so it was mostly print. It started with print, like with 90% of people, and then it sort
Mhm.
of went into electronic media and digital media such as it is. So that, in a nutshell, is how we are where we are today.
In your journey of being where you are today, you mentioned some very interesting things as well that we're seeing right now. Perhaps शुरू में शायद मीडिया में आना उसमें काम करना इतना आसान नहीं होता होगा अभी भी I feel like it's not that easy, but at
Hmm.
least there's an awareness that this is a discipline where you can actually set your foot
So,
in, work towards something. Narratives का दौर है तो और भी ज़्यादा interesting चीज़ें आ रही हैं. There's a focus on the linguistics, how do you word things, how do you put it out there, uska impact kya hai in real time and over the years. And so very interesting that you mentioned that your first column was related to Israel,
Yeah.
uh, Israel Gaza. If that's what you said. And aaj bhi the situation has not changed but only aggravated for those people, and the role of media along with that has also somewhat become equally important. And with the digital platforms coming in, तो game ही change हो गई है. But, sir, before we go on to all these topics, my very first question to you would be, being part of this entire journey and now having this experience of print and electronic media as well, but also थोड़ा सा मैं आपसे एक broadcast side की कुछ चीज पूछना चाहूंगी
Ji.
कि what's the first thing that a newsroom feels when a crisis breaks in or when a breaking news type kind of situation happens? Um, do we report too fast or do we really wait for it? How do our media houses, take into stock what's to be reported, what's not to be reported?
Well, that I think will depend largely on the nature of the crisis or the nature of the breaking news, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always better to be cautious at first, in my opinion. And I mean, look, there's been an evolutionary process. I know people love to hate on the media, and there's good reasons to do that. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that the media has evolved and at least evolved some degree of maturity and responsibility, I generally am of the favor, and I think in my newsroom, definitely this is the way it works, is that be cautious at first. I mean, to give a very perhaps insensitive example, okay, is now, when this whole massive wave of terrorism was sweeping Pakistan, I don't mean the present one, I'm talking about, post
War and terrorism.
9/11, post, yeah. I mean, there was this about like 8, 9 years in which there were multiple bomb blasts every day, assassinations, so on and so forth. There were 2013 elections and all of that, right? So in those years, we learned to be cautious because there's so much going on. You have to try and report on it as responsibly as possible. So in the beginning, you don't end up giving up too much information. If it's
Mm-hmm.
unconfirmed, then you say it's unconfirmed. But again, I would say that if it's unconfirmed and not that important, why would you say it to begin with?
Why
Wait
would
for
you?
confirmation, right? So one bitter lesson we learned was in terms of casualties.
Hmm.
And again, like I said, a somewhat insensitive analogy or example here is that we learned that don't kill too many people in the first blast, right? Like, for example, you're getting conflicting reports. Your reporter is saying that, oh my God, there's like 20 people dead here. And now you see, when you're in a crisis situation like that, when a reporter is in a crisis situation like that, he's part of that situation, right? Just because he's wearing a press vest or he's got a microphone in his hand doesn't mean he's not human, doesn't mean he's not being affected. So, especially reporters who are not deeply experienced in this kind of conflict coverage, and it was conflict coverage, it was war reporting in one sense,
Hmm.
they tend to, maybe inflate casualty numbers. So you want to try and keep the casualty numbers initially low until you have confirmation from, say, hospital sources. If you have ED saying something, then you need to say it's ED saying something, right? Because you can't bring people back to life. That's then embarrassing. I mean, it's not only insensitive, it's not only possibly alarming for people whose loved ones or relatives or friends were in that area, right? But
Hmm.
also from the perspective of the channel's credibility, Asan Alfaz mein, I mean, living people can die, you can't bring dead people back to life. So a lot of times, especially in the initial phases of this wave of terrorism, we'd find that the initial casualties, the channels, the headlines would be saying, oh, 30 dead, 40 dead. But then it would come
Exactly.
down to like 2025. So it's better to start small and then bring your way up. So I mean, again, it's very situational. I can't really give you a one size fits all answer to this, right? Now it's of course even more dangerous because so many times, and you're going to make mistakes, you're going to screw up, everybody's human, right? But you have to,
Yeah.
if you do make a mistake, then you should acknowledge it, right? Like, for example, be it the Russia-Ukraine war, be it Gaza, be it the Pakistan-India war that took place recently.
Mm.
Every time this happens, there's always this one video game and the footage of it goes viral. And they're like, oh my God, this is happening. And I've seen this one video game, it's called Arma 3, used about 3 dozen times in different scenarios. So you have to be very, you have to suspect everything that comes to you, which makes you very irritating in real life because people are like, मैंने ये सुना है, मैंने कहा अच्छा कहाँ से सुना है? किसने कहा है? So
Mm.
on WhatsApp, people get really annoyed. They're like, I have sources. मैंने कहा, okay, well, where is the confirmation of this news? So you have to be a little bit cautious. I think that the temptation always is to be fastest. But I would argue that it's better to be right than to be fast in the long term. I would like to think that people recognize it. And I think that your viewer has also become far more discerning. A lot of the
Mm.
times when a news channel makes a mistake, it's social media that points it out, not someone in the newsroom. You also have to understand that when you're in a crisis situation, like I remember jab wo Manawa police training camp in Lahore was attacked, there were 4 distraction bombs in Lahore that day too. So you don't know where to send the reporters. You don't know what's
Mm.
going on. I mean, अगर कहीं खुदा ना मतलब God forbid घड़ी शाह में बॉम्ब हो रहा है आपको वो खबर आई है आप 3 और जगहों में भी बॉम्ब फट रहा है then you're like is it the
Mm.
same blast being misreported? Is it actually happening? So you have to go out, you have to send people. There are resource constraints. You have a few people at the desk dealing with, you know,
So much. Mm.
so much, everything from mass murder to the weather. So mistakes do happen. You just have to have a sort of corrective mechanism, and the first corrective mechanism is here, and
Yourself.
it filters out into the newsroom. Gee.
No, I guess when everything's moving this fast, the entire concept of verification itself takes a change.
It
And
does.
we're also witnessing that and as you mentioned, the social media platforms kind of do half the job regarding that. So it makes the job easy and also tricky at the same time because
Yeah,
then you have to
exactly
face the
that.
music.
Yes,
So
exactly that.
I've always heard this thing about the pressure to break the first news. How true it is with regards to, all these platforms to be the sole bearer of that one particular news, and then everything flows from there.
Agree.
Is
There's,
that
there's, there's,
where it
there's
comes
there's very
from?
much a pressure. There's very much a pressure. Again, now it depends on again, it depends on the kind of news, right? Like
Naturally.
suppose you've got some exclusive inside information, right? Now that's not something that most other people are going to have. That's your exclusive. You go and run with it. Otherwise, I mean, look, being the first to report a bomb blast and reporting it incorrectly, I don't see the merit in that, right? In about 5 minutes, everybody's going to find out anyway. Nobody's going to remember कि यार आप लोगों ने 1.5 सेकंड पहले इसको पोस्ट किया था, right? That's irrelevant. So I mean, and I also think that that's changed. I mean, I also remember, okay, so fads emerge in media, okay, and it's very funny to see. Okay, there was a time when everything was exclusive. Everything
Mhm.
was exclusive. Like I
Everything was
remember
a
this.
breaking news.
Well, सब कुछ exclusive है. I mean,
जी.
and the most ridiculous things were exclusive. Like exclusive. Met department says Karachi temperatures to reach 40 degrees. यार ये कहाँ से exclusive है? You
हाँ
can go
जी.
on their website and find out, right? So there were some really funny things happening. Like some people, like 4 channels, are covering the same thing. They've just got slightly different camera angles, and each one of them is running exclusive. And
Hmm.
sometimes the exclusive would cover the entire screen. It's like, hey, bro, I'm here to watch the news, not watch your watermark. So
Yeah.
that changed. Now it's not that much of a craze anymore. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah,
No,
that's
it
how.
certainly does bring a perspective because the rush to ensure that you're the one bringing the news forward and then capturing the audience's attention.
That's a natural thing, right? That's a natural thing. I mean, again, it has to be tempered with accuracy. That's all I'm going to say. Like getting an exclusive interview, that's fantastic. Getting the news first, that's fantastic. But in an interview, of course, that's a whole different animal. In the news, you want to try and at least be sure that the news you're getting is somewhat accurate, even if that is at the expense of timing. That's my view. I mean, I'd rather be right than right now, so to speak.
So let's come to what happened quite recently with Pakistan and India. And I think this is where my interest is also with regards to your perspectives on this. And I think your article on the matter was perhaps one of the most interesting and timely
Thank
reads
you.
for myself, at least, and I'm sure others must have also gained insights from it. You wrote that this is less of a fog of war when it comes, and it's more of a smog of war now, with the social media and the media all converging together. Because you mentioned then, because while former, the fog of war is natural, the latter is very much man made.
Yeah.
Now, the disinformation whirling machines of media. Country specific, let's move on to how we've seen both sides come up with their responses of the crisis of Pakistan India war. So, every time there's tension between the two countries, we start to see jingoistic political speeches, and that's all right. That's what
Yeah. That's
the political
natural.
leaders
That's gonna
are
happen.
bound to
Yeah.
do. They have their vote banks, based entirely on their ideologies, incidents. All of these things are going to take that up. But media, with its responsibility to report and aware people, what has changed?
Oh, I think everything. Um, everything and nothing. Okay, so and I'll explain. Now let's start with since we're talking about Pakistan and India. Yeah, okay, so the reason that I use the terms fog of war and smog of war is that, I mean, fog of war is a real thing, right? During wartime, there's so much happening, so many moving parts. So a lot of things get confused, a lot of things you cannot confirm. And naturally,
Exactly.
wartime reporting has its own do's and don'ts and its own protocols, which I think one swings into automatically once you have enough experience, right? Um,
Hmm.
in India, it was smog, and the number one vector of that smog was Indian media. And I actually am still stunned by the ridiculous nature of it, frankly. I mean, I'm really struggling to find,
The
you know,
audacity of it.
the audacity and the stupidity of it, really.
Yes.
Because I mean, you're going on, you're going crazy, sitting there, jumping up and down. I mean, wearing
Hmm.
uniforms. There's like 20 graphics on the screen, and you bombed Karachi, you've captured Islamabad. There's been a coup in is Pakistan.
Sound, yeah.
Field Marshal Asim Munir is now in jail. He wasn't Field Marshal then. So chale, General Asim Munir is in jail. Balochistan is declared itself to be a separate thing. And the shocking thing is that it seems that a large amount of the population actually believes it. And
That's the
what is
sad
the point?
reality. Hmm.
Sorry?
I mean, that's the sad reality that if an entire country that's known for its so-called living standards and metrics, but where is the social awareness?
Where is the social awareness? And again, I mean, sometimes, I mean, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine recently. This is the true two nation theory. Because on one hand, you have Pakistan, where we are conditioned to believe almost nothing that the state tells us. I mean, if we hear something coming from the state or from a politician, our first instinct is to doubt it. Okay,
Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes it's to the extent that at 3 in the afternoon, if they were to say, yeah, the sun is out, it's really hot, we will
You're gonna
go,
look out and see if
we
it's
will go and
actually.
check, man. I will go on the balcony and I'll be like, are they right? Are they telling me the truth? And on India, it seems that you have a large amount a significant amount of the population simply believes everything that the state tells them with no desire even to fact check. I mean, now again, perhaps my metrics for this aren't exactly accurate. I'm seeing what I'm seeing on Indian media. I'm seeing what I'm seeing on Indian social media. I'm picking up chatter where I can. But this to me seems to be the perception.
Mhm.
It is a machinery, I think, in India that is now out of control and that is now consuming itself because they have created a parallel reality for their
Absolutely.
viewers. And it is
Mhm.
all for domestic consumption. You see, it is all for domestic consumption. Sometimes it feels that India's foreign policy is for domestic consumption because you're not fooling anyone else, beta. You're only
Hmm.
fooling yourselves. And when you fool yourself successfully to it, ultimately you start believing your own lies. And that creates a very, very, very dangerous paradigm. Because eventually, the bubble of perception will collide with the rock of reality and it'll go boom. And then you're
Exactly.
like, okay, now what? You know? And because it's the hardest thing in life is to admit that you're wrong. Okay, I find it very difficult to do that, right? So You will do anything to avoid admitting that admission. And then you will start doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on your own lies. And you keep digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. So I don't know where this goes. I mean, again, this is really the evolution of a machinery that was created to promote India's interests, to attack India's perceived enemies, Pakistan primarily, and also China. Later on, it was extended to Bangladesh. It was extended to Canada after the assassination campaign. And
Absolutely.
for anyone who's really interested in this, I would strongly suggest that you take the time out to read the EU Disinfo Lab's extremely detailed report
The
on it.
Indian Chronicles, yes.
Yeah, and the way that machinery works. And now you see, there's also such a thing known as the imperial boomerang, right? That
Mm-hmm.
what you do abroad, as part of it, eventually boomerangs and comes back home. So the Indian fake news machinery right now, I think, is primarily targeted at their own public. You have seen it. You saw it during Corona. You saw it during every single thing that happens. There is a certain narrative that they want to keep pounding, 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 and it seems to work. That's the scary part. It seems to work. Despite the entire world telling a different story, you want to believe the story you're telling yourself. You're like, okay, everybody's lying. That's because they're jealous of us. That's because it's, India phobia.
They
It's
hate us
Islamophobia.
because they ain't us.
They hate us because they ain't us. But they don't want to be you. Nobody wants to be you.
There,
So, yeah.
there's the point that you mentioned, the machinery that was initially targeted towards their perceived enemies has now finally come back home, and it's now literally poking their own audiences.
Consuming
Right?
them. It's consuming them.
Exactly. There's an implosion that's going on, and they're unable to perhaps take the weight of it. And
Yes,
yet you will still
absolutely.
see screen time for Goswamis and the Bakshis and the Aryas. And it,
Yeah,
it seems to be a never-ending spiral,
it is.
especially once they were debunked. It has actually gotten worse
Yes, it
after
has.
they've been debunked.
That's
Um,
right.
the quality of apologies coming in, not so apologies coming in. And, you mentioned how they also turned their cannons towards Canada. They turned their cannons toward Trump, who
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
that who are
Trump,
you?
Major Gaurav Arya, he
Gee,
actually called the Iranian foreign minister son of a
oh my
pig.
God, yes, yes,
I
yes,
mean, yes, that happens. See, so much happens that you can't keep track. I can't keep track of it anymore. I'll be
exactly.
quite honest. I mean, can you imagine like this like hate mongering two-bit anchor is
Hmm.
actually now has the potential to cause a diplomatic incident. Arnab Goswami
Absolutely,
had to delete that clip in which he was going after
exactly.
Trump. See, this is what to say. Never believe your own BS, no matter how sweet it smells. You know? I mean, maybe they're into it. I don't know. It's so yeah, it's amazing. Like again, I said, right? You have no option of pulling back. You have to keep doubling down. You have to keep doubling down. Because it's
Hmm.
like what Winston Churchill, I mean, I hate to quote the guy, but I have to here,
Hmm.
said about dictators, right? He was like, dictators ride to and fro upon tigers from which they dare not dismount. So it's the same with India and its propaganda machine and its fake news machine and its disinformation machine, is that they can't get off of it. Otherwise, it will consume them. Their own followers, their own supporters will consume them because you have built expectations to like beyond the skies, right? Okay, by this is it. We are the new world superpower. We can do this. And then you can't take out Pakistan. So,
Exactly.
the gap between perception and reality is so huge that you can only fill it with BS, which is
You
exactly
know,
what.
un until this particular incident happened, it was actually quite intriguing to see that how their electoral advantages were being extracted through this kind of disinformation and
Yeah.
propaganda machine. To a certain degree, the BJP primarily has had its successes using these kind of gimmicks, using their
Yes.
Godi media, and whatever digital, troll farms that they have accumulated over time and have
Yeah.
used them to their best potential to bring out those changes on ground, to somewhat, create that communal divide, be it trends like love jihad, be it, as you mentioned, what happened during the corona
Food
times.
jihad,
uh,
land jihad. I mean, I don't
बिल्कुल
even know. I
बिल्कुल
mean, how many
एवरीथिंग.
jihad?
इतना
Yeah,
तो खैर हमारी साइड पे भी नहीं वो करते जितना उन्होंने बना दिए द टाइप्स ऑफ जिहाद, बट
yeah.
being if to a certain degree, if you actually observe it, there was a certain mastery behind it to make sure that this works for their benefit. And somehow now we have seen it be so overused and burnt out that the international media that was once hijacked by Indian narratives primarily when it came to Pakistan has also now started to question what exactly has been going on. And that leads me to ask you then, and also in your own experiences perhaps, that how do you think that international media has portrayed Pakistan during crises, and especially when it comes to Pakistan India crises,
Oh.
and how has our local media challenged that, or has it ever?
Well, I don't think that the local media really has the capacity or the reach to really challenge
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, we can, but that will really remain confined to the borders of Pakistan, right, or wherever a Pakistani audience is. As far as I mean, I think that you're spot on target when you say that it worked. The reason that they do it is because it works, right? And it has worked, and it continues to work to some extent. But at some point, you become victims of your own success, right? वो कहते हैं ना कि if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If it's
Uh-huh.
working, just keep going with it.
Let
So
it
they
go.
just kept going with it, going with it, going with it. And you see, everything works up until the point that it doesn't, right?
True.
I mean, let's use a military analogy. Okay. Now, there was a time in medieval warfare when the armored knight was the master of the battlefield, right? You cannot
Mhm.
take the guy down. It's like a tank. He'll mow down your infantry. Okay, so cavalry charge, cavalry charge, cavalry charge. But then, then here come muskets. Here come cannons. If you're still going to do a cavalry charge into the cannons, you are done. So
You're
I think that
done.
that's what they're doing. They're still doing the same cavalry charge. If you even look at India's official rhetoric, I mean, it's something from the early 2000s. Terrorism, sponsor of terrorism, this, that, this, that. The war on terror is over. The world has moved on. You haven't. Because that is the approach that paid you dividends, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Pakistan is always painted as the aggressor, always painted as the bad guy. By and large, a credulous international media or an agenda-driven international media went along with that. But again, victory has a thousand fathers, defeat is an orphan. And it was pretty clear pretty early in the war, this recent Indo-Pak war, that India suffered casualties that were incredibly embarrassing for it. Now, here's the deal, right? Now, India is like, we won. Okay, fine. So, Bismillah. But
ठीक
when
है.
a large power takes on a smaller power and achieves anything short of absolute victory or the achievement of their political gains, right?
Hmm.
Um, that's a defeat. So I think the international media can say that. The international media's tilt and bias will remain. Um, I don't even really think very highly of the overall credibility of Western media, especially after what we've seen in Gaza, after what we've seen in
Absolutely.
Palestine.
Absolutely.
But despite their very clear biases, despite the serious entanglements of their governments with India, on economic ties, on military ties, strategic ties, you will still see international media, I mean, calling a spade in this thing. I mean, however cautious their terminology is and however balanced, both sides, that dynamic that always creeps into the media, right? I think that they had no real choice except the overwhelming evidence that was in front of them. And beyond the
Absolutely.
international media, I mean, if you look at, serious journals like, for example, of national interest, you look at, reports coming out of Stimson, and so on and so forth. So again, it largely jibes with Pakistan's narrative. Ki, yeah, we held them off and we held them off fairly successfully, and in fact had some surprises for them that they did not absolutely expect. Why didn't they expect them? Because instead of actually listening to strategic planners, instead of actually listening to your military telling you about your actual capabilities vis-a-vis Pakistan's capabilities, you decide to listen to Abhinav. And you decide to listen to Gaurav Arya, and you decide to listen to General Bakshi. And you know what they say, na? Like, elect a clown, expect a circus. So that's
What it
kind of
felt
what you
like,
got, man. And you're the clown.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It felt like that the audience had been fed so much by the state, over time, that now they really had to see it. And to Pakistanis at least, it felt like the Indian state was in such pressure from its own people.
Yeah.
It almost felt like to them that they had no choice, no
Yes,
choice
absolutely
but to
right.
go ahead and make a mistake, make it
Yeah.
worse. And
And
that's what.
that is what we call the commitment trap, right? That's what we call the commitment trap. You raise the ante so high that you can't walk away from the table.
And now they want you to prove it who you are as a country
Yeah,
then.
exactly. That's how it
And
works.
so on our end, we were going through a completely different situation. Our
Yeah.
own political crises, internal issues were, and of course, no one has forgotten them. But in the face of an external enemy,
Yeah.
perhaps what India expected by attacking Pakistan was deepening the fissure.
Absolutely.
Rather, it helped us somewhat converge. And it is a positive outcome, of course. We have then, in turn, uh, our own social media naturally churned out on a war footing to deal with the
Oh, yeah.
misinformation coming out from the Indian side and otherwise the deep fakes, the images and videos from video games and whatnot, and minute by minute debunking of their statements, arguments, video footages coming in from every single city, the same accounts that were once known, they were not seen in a positive light,
Mhm.
were now standing side by side,
Yeah.
with the forces, of course, and in a very different domain, but still standing
Sure.
together, ensuring the kind of truth that must travel not just to our own people, but what the international media was saying. Um, and sir, so on that note as well, we decided to unban Twitter. I think that's a great thing that we did. But unbanning and banning platforms should not be as a result of your own something that you think needs to be done. It's a platform for people. Let it be free. Let there be transparency.
Absolutely.
I think the
Absolutely.
message that we receive on our end is that let there be transparency. And I would like your comments on how, the Pakistani side then projected its narratives, what came about, what more could we have done, and where do you see this going ahead?
Okay. So first of all, I think that authenticity trumps mass manufactured hashtags 10 times out of 10. You will remember not too long ago, this entire cadre of fifth generational warriors was made. And what did they used to do? They used to simply copy paste the same message, same boring message, same syntax, same text, blah, blah, blah. Clearly fake accounts. Okay. I mean, even a child could tell. Okay. And they're
Mhm.
like trending hashtags, thank you this, thank you that, blah, blah, blah. Did it work? No, absolutely not. This time, what you saw, it was not a state-driven campaign. This was
Absolutely.
100% organic, or chalo, 99% organic. Okay, let's leave that 1% for safety. And it was the people. And again, I mean, whatever you want to call them, our netizens, our, digital citizens, our cyber warriors, we are trained in a making fun of things, okay, because we do
Best
that, we
humor.
make fun of ourselves all the time. And
Absolutely.
when a person can make fun of themselves, then beta, throw the
Imagine.
gun in front of them. Okay. And when they turn their guns on you, it's over. And that is exactly what happened. So we're trained in that. We are also deeply trained in skepticism. We are a
Absolutely.
very skeptical people as a general rule.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, the earlier point, right, about day and night. I mean, we believe nothing. So
Mhm.
your entire sort of social media generation is trained in debunking your own state, so what is India in front of
What
them?
about the others? What is left?
What is left? And the thing is that, I mean, even debunking is a really big word to use in this context because
Mhm.
Karachi is not being bombed. Okay. Lahore has not been captured, man. It's so easy to tell. So I mean, it's yes, it's to do with the skill of our netizens. I mean, I don't know a better term to use, so I'm just going to stick to that. But it is also to do with the absolute inanity and incompetence of the guys
Mm.
you're up against, you know. So
Mm.
half the time, I mean, our first reaction would be like, just look at it and be like, what is wrong with these people? And then it would be like, nahi beta, thak, 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 thak. And they just
Mm.
couldn't take it. You see, the more we laughed at them, the shriller and more psychotic they became. And the thing is, here's the
Absolutely.
beautiful part, it's not just people in Pakistan and India seeing this. This has a global audience. And you can see them. I mean, like even right now, there's this like Scottish YouTuber, Callum or something. And he made this some video or whatever, and Indian media has been displaying it in the wrong way. And every time he debunks them, he takes out screenshots of the direct
Yes.
messages you're getting, and they're rape threats, they're abuse,
Yes. Yes.
and they're
Mm.
doing a brilliant job of it. When they did that assassination campaign in Canada, then
Mm-hmm.
you saw the entire social media going after Trudeau. What are you? Huh? You are this, you are that,
Exactly. Mm.
like that, and so on and so forth, and abusing Canada and, just going crazy. That does not win hearts and minds. It
That
does.
does the opposite, rather.
It does the exact opposite. So, I mean, I would argue, and I mean, I have no metrics for this, that I mean, after the Israelis, I think that this is the one group on social media that is widely hated and mocked, and because of their own actions. I mean, I feel bad for like the sane and reasonable Indians out there, because there are sane and reasonable Indians out there. Obviously, it's a statistical impossibility that there won't be. And
Mm.
they are tarnished by this shrill and frankly psychotic lot. So I think that that's brilliant. I think that that serves Pakistan's interests perfectly. I mean, as Napoleon said, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake.
When he's making a
And
mistake.
now the machine is so out of control that they couldn't stop it if they wanted to, you see.
Absolutely.
So I think it's fantastic. I mean, I absolutely love it. I want them to keep going.
You know, I felt really bad about some of my, friends across the border, um, because you would want to support your country and you have every right to do so. But
Absolutely.
with what? With what? The case in point is there is nothing that you can do now. The damage is done.
Yeah.
Whatever the dog fight happened, the results that happened, the international media confirmed it. जिनके बनाए हुए जहाज थे उन्होंने कंफर्म कर दिया, तो अब पीछे रह क्या जाता
ये पीछे रह
है?
क्यों
एंड
नहीं?
एग्जैक्टली पीछे रह, सो स्ट्रेटेजिक एम्बिग्विटी का कॉन्सेप्ट भी यहाँ पे उनके लिए काम नहीं आया. और हमारे एंड पे ऑफ कोर्स द पॉजिटिव thing was that people connected together, and strangely enough, in times of such animosities and conflicts, we have
Huge.
shown such light-hearted strength. I don't know
Yeah,
if that
yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense,
yeah, yeah. I
but
know. I think that defines it perfectly. Very good.
and it was a polarized society. We still have our own
Still
views,
a
very much
polarized.
will remain resilient on that end as well. But moving forward, like I said earlier too, what is it that how do you think this crisis can reshape our own national narrative moving forward? And do you think we have the chance to make some wrongs right?
Yes, yes, we do. Whether we will or not, that's another question. I think that, look, right now the country desperately needs a healing touch. Okay.
Mhm.
I think that we need to build on this field, because I'll tell you something, right? Right now we're in the afterglow of it. It's not going to last. you know it'll
Mm.
last. I mean, okay, fine, then another threat comes from India. Yes, we will band together again, but this is the time to heal some long standing domestic fissures. I'm not going to get into the long list of it, but we have certain extremist groups running rampant in Pakistan. They are in many ways a greater existential threat for Pakistani society than any kind of outside interference ever will. Because these are things that corrode the fabric of your society. They corrode the inherent unity that you want to do. So that is an anti-state activity. There are ethnic divides, there are political divides, there are sectarian divides. We need to move towards trying to heal them. And it cannot be a purely kinetic approach. We have tried that. No? If a purely kinetic approach worked in isolation, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right?
Okay.
So you need this sort of wide spectrum thing. And I mean, again, fundamentally, I mean, you have to focus on the economy and you have to listen to the people. Look, I mean, I'll give a very like recent example, this canal controversy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, back in November, I remember having a conversation with policymakers, when this thing was bubbling here in Sindh, this anger and this feeling of,
Yeah.
being, exploited or whatever was bubbling. And I remember having a talk about this, the Cholistan project, and the people arguing in favor of it were like, hey, you know what, it needs to be done. Maine kaha, okay, sure, you're arguing that it needs to be done, but I can guarantee you that if you go ahead with it without taking the province on board, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
mechanism for it. There's the Council of Common Interest. It is enshrined in the Constitution. If you try to push this forward, you are creating yet another domestic front to fight upon, and it a potentially disastrous one. And look, it turned out exactly the way that it was
Mm-hmm.
predicted, right? Now, this was not rocket science, Ji. This was something that could easily have been done. You sit down together and you talk. The talks, you will have people grandstanding. You will have people wasting time. You will have the process stretch on maybe weeks, maybe months, but it is still an essential process. Ultimately, you have to sit down and talk to your own people. It is your own people. They wish you well. They wish Pakistan well. This is my home. I don't have any other. Okay. I don't want to have any other. And I would like the state to have a dialogue with me. Na? I would like the state to listen. Everything cannot be top down, especially not in a country like Pakistan. You see, where there are deficiencies in communication, where there are deficiencies in governance and administration. You have to move forward with as much consensus as you can manage. It's not always possible. I know that. It's messy, it's ugly, it breaks, it leaks, right? But it is essential. It is the only mechanism we have.
You mentioned the deficiencies in comms, and now coming to perhaps a little bit of um, how a state normally responds. But in a different scenario, I would have questioned why is there such a big gap. But we saw quite a different approach this time from
Yes.
tri-services briefings, from
Yes.
the spokesperson here in the Foreign Office, and how things were worded out instantly. So of course, there's no room for critique there. Rather, there's appreciation. But even then, at times it feels as if there's a certain disconnect, or perhaps the language is too official, catering to a very different audience, not taking on board what the people have to say. And I'm not generally talking about the word that happened, I'm
Okay.
speaking otherwise, that often the messaging from the state feels like there's a disconnect. So this was just one crisis where I would say that we were luckily transparent and authentic about how we were taking things forward. But for a crisis communications strategy, perhaps if you have any suggestions that you would want, perhaps a manual out there, what would be those important things that must be highlighted from a perspective where you're sending out a message to very different audiences?
Hmm.
Internally, it's quite different, and externally, of course, who are we looking at?
I think, okay, again, so that will depend on the nature of the crisis, right? In this particular crisis, because it was such a huge crisis, right? I mean, it was an existential crisis. I mean,
Absolutely.
like, I mean, your existence was at stake, right? Your citizens were being killed by a hostile foreign power.
Exactly.
So here the unity of message is critical, and I think that by and large that was achieved. I mean,
Hmm.
if the briefings were technical, it's because they had to be, right? You can't not be technical in those. So
Exactly.
I think that this is actually a really good example of how to get it right.
Hmm.
We also saw that there was very little daylight, very little gap between what the civilian administration was saying and what the military was saying, right? I mean, the military briefings were left to the military and the civilian briefings were left to the civilians, how it should be. I think another good example of this was during the
Hmm.
coronavirus pandemic. Very quickly, I've forgotten the name of that coordination
The
body,
NCOC, something like the
NCC.
National Command Operation Center, something like that.
NCAC, something like that. Anyway,
Something like that.
so that
Yes.
actually did its job, right? I mean, look, you can't control everybody, right? So you are gonna have some, maybe religious leader, maybe political leader, randomly saying something weird. Okay, that was around the world. You can't just, tell everybody ki, like, I mean, you can't send a mass SMS to everybody ki, like, aap chup rahe hain, sir, main bolunga. It's not going to work like that, right? It can't happen. But I think by and large it was done well, and I think that is actually a very good example of what can be achieved if all the different institutions actually work with each other and not against each other. There's always
Mm-hmm.
going to be some friction, but in times of crisis, you have to speak with a single voice. So I think that was done well. Other than that, I mean, when we talk about crisis, then we'll have to like sort of, if you could narrow it down to what kind of crisis we're talking about, then I think we might be able to like expand
Mm-hmm.
on this better.
I guess perhaps even on issues like the FATF, right? Pakistan's listing, blacklisting, graylisting, and or issues related to IMF, what's going on in the country, even on that end, sometimes it feels that what we want the world to hear out seems to go amiss. And if you want to take India again on the crisis level, is that for years we have been dishing out those years after those years. But it seems that to no end, we're achieving the kind of attention we want with regards to Kashmir. Although, thanks to Trump, we've seen the
Actually,
internationalization of
thanks to Modi. Thanks to
well,
Modi.
mostly that,
Yeah,
of
because no,
course.
because thanks, yeah, no, 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 because Modi created the situation for Trump to be able to say something like that. And again,
Absolutely.
I mean, what a heck of an own goal that is.
Hmm.
Because you spend decades trying to say, no, Kashmir is not even a bilateral issue, it's our issue. Why are you even talking about it? Why are you saying Pakistan and India? And you yourself, because of your obsessive nature, have rehyphenated Pakistan and India and to some extent brought Kashmir back to the global attention. I don't think much is going to happen there. But yeah. Yeah, sorry, you were saying something. I
No, no,
took it.
absolutely. And, even with regards to the issues of Kulbhushan Yadav, for example, we have been talking how RAW has been
Yeah,
funding issues in Balochistan, but no one seems to have paid that kind of attention. So, on that end,
that's a good point.
how do you then convince the international community and also your own people about it? Because currently the state does suffer at the hands of disinformation from this particular
Yes,
dimension as well. And it is a crisis
yes.
that requires its own kind of attention and its own kind of perhaps commitment if we require a resolve towards it.
Hmm. So, okay, now in terms of the dossiers and stuff like that, okay, so we're going to have to draw a distinction here, I think, between is this a failure to convince the world, so to speak, or is this really just geopolitical power politics? In the sense that when we say the world, okay, we're talking about the international community, we're talking about foreign governments, we're talking about heads of state, let's just say, right? We don't need to convince our allies are our allies, right? We're talking about then largely, I think, the West. And I think that there is obviously an inherent, I don't want to say bias, but certainly a leaning, has always been a leaning in India, because India's always had great marketing. Let's face it, right? The
Exactly.
soft
So
power.
on that end, exactly. From that perspective, how come, what is it that we are failing at with
Okay,
regards to that?
I don't think we're very good at selling ourselves. And you see, there are things you can sell, and I think we're moving in that direction. But also, let's not ignore, right? I mean, the Afghan war takes place right here. We suffer the consequences.
Absolutely.
If the international media is reporting on multiple bomb blasts in Pakistan, it's not propaganda, they actually took place.
Hmm.
Then 9/11, the war on terror, I mean, all of that, Lal Masjid, I mean, the riotings, lynchings, all of that, they all play to
It
create
happened.
this
Yes.
perception. I mean, we're not blameless. We're not blameless in it. And in terms of domestic, because we are so used to being lied to, we again, the threshold of proof for even the Pakistani public is very high, and I think it's the same with the globe. But again, I think that right now, the mature, highly professional and highly effective, because the
Hmm.
victory settles a lot of questions in people's minds. And when
Absolutely.
they see that you have not only like come out better, but you've done it graciously, that does
Hmm.
make a difference. You have all these YouTubers, coming in, you have all these people coming in, and I'm not talking about the ones that the state sponsored. I'm talking about the genuine ones, because is tarah to, you may recall, we used to have this white woman running around. parroting, pro-state propaganda, nobody believed her because it was so obvious, you know. So again, genuineness works, authenticity works, So show the real Pakistan to people, use social media. And I think that we have begun to fairly effectively now. But that needs to be built on, that needs to be worked in terms of, like we could give the greatest dossier in the world with like, not only Kulbhushan, but like the names and addresses and every kind of convincing, comprehensive proof. But that doesn't mean that, say, the United States of America is suddenly going to be like, oh, wow, I guess we're going to cut off all trade with India. It's not going to happen. Welcome to the real
Absolutely.
world, right? But
Hmm.
it adds, like, for example, I remember when this whole assassination campaign in Canada was taking place, right? And in the UK and in the US. Now that intelligence came to the US and these countries from the Five Eyes, right? The Western
Hmm.
intelligence network system. That is the perfect time to, every time any news organization is tweeting about or writing about, like as the New York Times did, as Washington Post did, after that or quote that, put in ki like, yeah, and this is what they've done with us, tuck 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 tuck. So it links those two, it
Hmm.
links that, and it creates a narrative of responsible Indian behavior. So I would do that. I mean, I remember, I think this was during the Delhi riots, yeah, during the farmer protests. This one Twitter thread done on the Kupwara rapes in
Okay.
in Makbuza, in occupied Kashmir. That gained international attention because it went so viral. Now that one viral thread, I think, will do more in
Hmm.
in changing perceptions globally than any amount of dossiers. I'm not saying that the dossiers should not go there. Then you need to put these things
Absolutely.
on record. But right now, for example, when India was accusing Pakistan of terrorism with zero proof, it's been about what, I don't know even know how many days it's been since the Pahalgam massacre, which is
It
incredibly
was in
convincing.
April, end of April. Hmm.
End of April, right? So, matlab, almost been a month, right? When we're
Yes.
recording this, um, there's still no proof, right? There's nothing. I mean, you have provided nothing. Every time they talked about that, we should respond with a picture of Kulbhushan. Okay, bhai, this is your serving military officer. Here's
Absolutely.
his confession. Now talk.
Hmm.
Imagine if the opposite was true. Imagine if there was a Pakistani military officer caught by India. Do you think that that would not lead in every bulletin for 5 years?
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
yeah, you see, now we also suffer, and I will tell you this from the media. We also suffer because sometimes we are not given really like the juicy and authentic information that we want.
Hmm.
If those briefings are given, they are given to journalists who are considered to be, more loyalist, perhaps, more in tune with state propaganda, with state narratives and state propaganda. There's no harm in using that word. But the problem is everybody knows that. So that's what they expect from them. Those are not considered to be credible sources. And
Hmm.
we have seen in the recent past that all the sort of media personalities, I won't call them journalists, some of them could be, that were promoted as part of the state-sponsored narrative campaign have now all turned against the state, right?
Hmm.
I could name names, but I think we all know who we're talking about, you know. So yeah, that's always been a problem. So I mean, point is, if there are even journalists that you don't like, if there are news organizations that you don't like, and you provide them with credible information, when that information comes from them, it automatically, people are like, yeah, okay, if this guy is saying it, and this guy has not always been on board with like, gee, sir, whatever you do is right, sir,
Hmm.
then yeah, then this could be real. So you need a multi-spectrum approach. This sort of approach, and I like to think that that's changing. I'm not sure. Okay, these are our three selected, beautiful babies. We're just going to feed them and let the others
Hmm.
starve. I don't think that works. It doesn't work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I exactly, and precisely, we even saw this online with people who were writing mostly, not much in support of Pakistan. And I don't say the state, I mean
Mhm.
generally. Uh,
Generally.
People like Christine Fair, for example, and she has really come out thrashing in the Indian digital media
Yeah.
folks on their absolutely ridiculous claims. So that's the kind of change authenticity brings forward, and absolutely
Authenticity is
endorsing.
key. I mean, I'm just gonna like just sorry to interrupt, but
Hmm.
take a look at this, right? I mean, Israel pioneered the troll farm. Okay.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, right. Israel pioneered the troll farm before even anybody had even thought of this. And look at them being butchered, their propaganda being butchered by tweets and TikToks, right?
Absolutely, sir.
That it's social media that led the charge. Oh, now like all these different organizations or Piers Morgan is like, oh, it's a genocide. Well, yeah, we've been saying that for years now, for over a year and a half. And again, why? Authenticity. Authenticity.
Authenticity.
So you can't,
Absolutely.
na, as they say, you can't put lipstick on a pig. So
Make
you
it all
can't like,
beautiful.
yeah, I
Mm.
mean, you can take a pile of piece of dung and put it in the best packaging ever. It remains a piece of dung, right?
Absolutely.
So you gotta have a good product, and then yeah, you gotta sell that product, and we do, and we can. I mean, one thing I think that Pakistan lacks, if you'll allow me, is
Yes, sir.
uh, is an English language channel.
Sir, I
On
was
like
coming to that. I
you
was
were coming to
definitely
that.
coming
Okay,
to
come to
that.
it then. Then let's talk about that.
Because I was going to ask you that, every year when something like this happens, or every other month, if something like this happens, there is, we're constantly, why don't we have an English channel? There was one English
Every
channel, and,
time.
Dawn had one, and then it got, and then there was Indus, and somehow there's a
Express,
lack of
Express
continuity.
24/7. Yeah.
Exactly. And we like to look up to TRT, Al Jazeera, AJ Plus, and whatnot, RT, CGTN, but these are all state infrastructures, and um,
Yes.
we do
You can't
have
do it.
one.
Okay. You can't do it without that. Okay.
Exactly.
Especially in Pakistan. Believe me. Look, I've been involved in almost all of these projects. Okay. I
Absolutely,
was
sir.
part of I was
Yeah.
part of Geo India. But I know exactly their rise. Well, mostly their falls. They did rise. Like I
I've
mean, Geo
always
English,
been curious why the fall every single time.
money. Money, or it only comes down to money. Like Geo English में भी यही था कि अच्छा, okay, so first of all, English HR tends to be more expensive. It's just a fact. Okay, if you get an anchor, who can like speak perfectly in perfect eloquent English, I mean that
Mhm.
means that guy's received a more costly education. That means he's going to demand more money. Otherwise, he could always go and work somewhere else, right? So this is just a harsh fact, right?
I
It is the
see.
language of social mobility, upward mobility. This is how it is, right? Same goes for the people writing the stories. Same goes for the people doing the documentaries. Now you
Mhm.
can't, like, I wouldn't do an English TV package the way we do an Urdu TV package. There's more moving parts and this and
Absolutely.
that. This would be slightly more sober. I'm not saying boring, right? Now, here's the lessons we've learned so far, right? Geo English never launched again because they said, okay, this is just not going to be feasible. Because where do channels make their money from? They make it from advertising. So they're like,
Mhm.
yeah, there's so many channels for people to advertise on. Who would advertise on a niche channel which only like a small, very small percentage of this population can understand or relate to, right?
Mhm.
Dawn, when it started, and I'm not just going to, and I wasn't there in the launch team. I joined somewhat later. They had some fantastic programming. People still talk about it. They had documentaries, stuff like that,
Absolutely.
and those went global. I mean, for example, I remember that whenever anything like major happened in Pakistan, um, international channels would cut to Dawn News, in English. And that is projection. That is projection, the kind of projection that money can't buy. Except that, of course, you need money to buy it because it's never going to be sustainable on its own. In Pakistan, it's never going to work without subsidy. And that's fine.
Absolutely.
That's fine. What about I don't know what TRT's profitabilities are like, but I don't think that that's their primary goal. Obviously, they don't want to be making a
Exactly. The
giant
primary
loss.
goal has to be the narrative and the push that you have to give at the global stage. If
Absolutely.
finance and profit is the objective, then there's no point to it.
No, that's why none of these ever worked. Express 24/7 was probably one of the most low cost English channels,
Mm,
and I wasn't involved directly with it, but I was working with the Express group at
mhm.
that time. And they went with the most like low cost option they could, and I'm not saying it looked bad, it looked good because they used their existing reporters, they would translate the stories into English, and even
Mhm.
that couldn't be sustained. You
I
see,
see.
now
Mhm.
here's another crucial thing, Javeria ji, is when we talk about narrative, right? You gotta let the bacha grow up a little bit. before you do that. First, the channel
Exactly.
has to establish credibility.
Hmm.
Okay, you watch Al Jazeera. We watch Al Jazeera. We watch it for the quality, man. We don't watch it because we think, oh, let's see what Qatar is thinking now. It's not like that. Even TRT, sure, there's a more clear state narrative, but they've got great programming. They've got compelling shows. They've got excellent presentation. They have resources. So first,
Exactly.
you have to let it establish credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Then and naturally it's a Pakistani channel. Okay, naturally that is embedded in it, right? It's not going to go against Pakistan.
Hmm.
Sure, maybe there'll be some stories that are critical of the government. So what?
So
Then
let
don't
it
get
be.
all up. Then don't get all upset about it. Like,
Exactly.
oh my God, look, don't. It's not going to be in English PTV. It's not. It cannot be. No one is going to watch it. If your bulletin starts with today, the Prime Minister visited XYZ place and cut a ribbon, nobody's going to watch. You have
Exactly.
to treat it like a proper news channel, a slightly, intellectually elevated news channel,
Hmm.
and bring innovation into it. And then you can, and then when it comes to times like this, then you see what that channel does for you. You know. So
Absolutely.
this is critical. I think it's critical. I'm amazed that nobody's done it so far.
No, sir, definitely. And, I have always been watchful of such content, like even our digital platforms. Everyone now is also starting to make a move. Even if we were to invest properly in a digital platform for our narratives, because everyone abroad can access that too. If we feel we're unable to perhaps generate enough funds because the public audience won't pick it up or whatever our concerns are, there exists an alternative now.
Yes.
And aap ya main, whoever does English shows, we all have some things that we want to talk about.
Right.
But if we want the Pakistani narrative out, it requires that kind of backing if we want the results that Al Jazeera's or the TRTs create.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It is ना again. I mean, यहाँ पे जो आपका जो point है यार. I mean, देखो, you need then a network of reporters.
बिल्कुल
You
बिल्कुल
know,
sir.
I mean,
Investing in resources.
take me out there and show me the hidden stories. जैसे कि, for example, in Hunza side, there's like all of these women who are beekeepers. They raise bees. I mean, what a wonderfully sweet story that would be. You know,
Exactly.
then there's so much, and it'll blow your mind. There's like some crazy technological innovation happening in Pakistan. There's animation happening. I
जी
mean,
sir.
Usman Riaz made the glass worker, right? And it was that
It was perhaps one of the best animated projects that came
right,
out.
right.
Absolutely.
So I mean, point is, I want to go behind the scenes. I want to meet the boy, the men and women or the boys and girls who made that. You
क्योंकि
know,
सर लोग भी थक गए हैं constant
yeah,
politics,
yeah.
constant crisis.
Huh.
We don't want that.
No,
So
I am so tired of it. Look, it's statement journalism. अच्छा, जवेरिया ने ये कहा जरार के बारे में, फिर वो जरार से पूछेंगे कि आपके बारे में उसने ये बुरी
कुछ बताएं नहीं.
बातें, she's saying this about him. What do you say? So the first four headlines are statements. Okay, it's very easy, because you
Hmm.
can just do it sitting at your desk, pick up a tweet, turn it into a headline, not a problem. But the real work is out there. The real work is in the field, you know. And
Absolutely.
there are like these amateur filmmakers out there. There are people doing incredible social work. Bring those people out. Show me the fresh faces. Don't just show
Hmm.
me the same people that I've been seeing since, I mean, my hair's gone white looking at these people, man. Come on. You know, show me that. So you need the resources. See, that's the problem. That's why it can't purely be digital. Unless it still has to have, it can't just be like, I'm sitting there talking to you, you're sitting there talking to me. No, you got to show me. Show me what's out there. I mean,
Exactly.
shit, go further. एक जो बड़ा मसला है ना यहाँ पर कि so much gets next कि oh my God, but you are showing the wrong image of Pakistan. Okay? Now tell me
Hmm.
something, right? Have you seen the Jeffrey Dahmer show on
The
Netflix?
documentary,
The
the show, yes,
documentary
yes,
and
yes, yes.
yeah, yeah. Now, do you think that anyone says, oh my God, this is giving bad impression of America, don't play it? No,
Absolutely not. It was
not at
trending on
all.
top some time
Yeah,
ago.
so why haven't I seen a TV series on Pakistan serial killers yet? Why not?
Decode that issue.
Yeah, show it to me. There are dozens. Okay, it's not just Javed Iqbal. I talk about this on a lot of podcasts, so I'm sorry. But there are so many out there. Give me a mini series on them, or if you show something, or even, I mean, okay, fine, prostitution, drugs. The point is that these things exist, they exist all around the world. No one in the
Exactly.
globe is going to be like, oh my God, they do drugs in Pakistan. That is terrible. Hey, dude, come on. Breaking Bad is the most popular
All
show
about that.
almost of all
Absolutely.
time. Did anyone in Arizona say, oh no, this is making us look bad? Oh,
Pablo Escobar, the greatest menace ever, he
thank
was
you. Yes,
portrayed in the show.
right.
So I guess even,
And even look at the Indian ones, yeah. Look at the Indian ones. I mean,
bilkul, bilkul,
there's
sir.
there's crime, there's horror, there's murder. Yeah, that's what people like to see. If it
Because
bleeds,
that's
it
what real
bleeds.
life is all about.
That's what life is
Unfortunate
all
or
about.
fortunate.
So, if you think that you're going to do something with like people dancing around trees and happy kisans throwing sona urea in the field, ain't nobody gonna watch that, man. It's not gonna
Hmm.
happen. Yeah. Sorry, you
We
ran
take a
before.
few lessons. No, no, sir. Definitely,
No.
because we do take a few lessons. The narrativization is not just something that stays stuck with the newsrooms or official briefings. It's your entertainment industry. It's the dramas, it's the movies, the cinema, the stories, the animations.
Full
Everything
spectrum.
needs to.
It's full
Exactly. It's a
spectrum.
full spectrum, just like our
Yeah.
full spectrum military doctrine. Perhaps a
And
full spectrum.
warts and all. I mean, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have to
Everything
have all
comes
of it.
together.
You have to have all.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
and
otherwise you're North Korea. The great leader today woke up. Rainbows were in the sky, birds were singing. I mean, okay, great, fine. Who's gonna watch that?
I
People
think
will watch it to make fun of it.
that's the kind of direction Indian media is perhaps taking the lead into. We
Yeah,
still
well, I mean,
feel a little bit safer.
I just recently saw this clip of Indian media. I don't know how old it is, in which they're comparing the size of Modi's chest with Salman Khan and other people. So, yeah, that was
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
weird. I was hoping it was a parody, but it wasn't. It was actually serious.
No, so there are some wonders that we've come about as time progressed. With that being said, sir,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I've had a wonderful time having this conversation
Same
with
here.
you. Also, there's so much more to talk about if we ever go in depth, and perhaps we can have a conversation again about reviewing certain things in detail,
Sure.
just skimming
No,
it
no,
off bit by
absolutely.
bit.
My play. I mean, this was supposed to be half an hour. It's gone to like 1 hour 15 minutes. I couldn't even tell.
I,
Yeah.
I I really
Yeah.
had such shows that go beyond that, but I absolutely enjoyed the conversation. I hope our
Thank
viewers
you.
will also enjoy as much as we
You
did
never know.
talking.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for
Thank you.
joining me. Hopefully,
Thank you.
we'll be able to reconnect again for another episode.
Absolutely. That would be a pleasure. Take care, Ji. Khuda
Thank
Hafiz.
you. Thank you, everyone, for streaming in. Hopefully, we'll see you again on another episode of Policy Beats.